Okay. So we promise we won't keep you too long. As the judges tally the score, I'm excited to see who's going to win. Just by way of background, my name is Mark Munoz from Ohm Venture Capital. I'm based here in Hawaii. We've been a venture capital firm for over a decade. We make investments, of course, in the U.S. and Canada, which may be part of the U.S. or no, I don't know. Don't want to go there. But also across Asia. Very, very happy to have one of our founders we backed, Caroline, here. And today's conversation is going to be about scale. And I think the best way to get this going is to maybe introduce ourselves and then say, what is scale, right? Because when we all started talking about this, Pamela, you asked that question. What does scale mean? So maybe you could start.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for staying through this last session today. And thanks also to Blue Startups for a really impressive couple of days here, and to all the people who pitched a moment ago. Really exciting stuff happening here in Hawaii. So I'm here today because I'm a dual citizen, Australian American, who's lived the last 30 years between Austin, Texas and Adelaide in Australia. And I'm hoping to settle here in Hawaii in the middle, literally east meeting west for my own life. So I'm here today as the managing partner of the Everywhen Capital Group, which is 5 different funds, including one that's a foundation headquartered in Austin, Texas. And we invest in revolutionary systems changing investments across the investment spectrum. So we directly invest. We invest in all different kinds of asset classes, including in Australia, a regenerative agricultural venture, and we also invest in venture capital funds directly. We've invested in about 20 venture capital funds. And so over the course of 30 years, I started out in Austin after growing up in the outback and living in Australia for a while. When I moved to Austin at the end of the 80s, it was a time of, as you probably remember, Austin, nobody really knew Austin at that time. And when I'd say I'm moving there, they'd say, where? And now everyone wants to go to Austin. So I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I did my PhD at the University of Texas on the psychology of investment decision-making of venture capitalists, and those were the days when Austin Ventures was a $28 million little fund with only 4 GPs. So I started investing then because when I'm a psychologist by training, started investing then because I was an accidental investor. I was consulting to venture capital firms and portfolio companies, and they paid me in stock. So I became an investor and have been investing ever since. And in 2012, our foundation had been working with Ernst & Young for the preceding 10 years to do the Social Entrepreneur of the Year award. And at the 10-year mark, we said, what are we getting for this investment? What's our return on investment? And so we decided to say, what did the next 10 years look like? And worked with the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto to say, what's the future of social entrepreneurship? That turned into a 4 or 5 year research project where we talked with people around the world who were at the cutting edge of working toward a better future for all of us. And so that led to us immediately pivoting to say, what does the world look like in 2030? And that was what we were asking a lot of people. And when we learned what the world looked like, the huge seismic jolts that would happen through the 2020s, we immediately shifted, which then caused a redefinition to us of what was scale. So with the level and scale of seismic jolts that would be our norm toward the end of the 2020s, we said we have to redefine what scale means to us. And so for us, it's about revolution and systems change that has dramatic impact on the key challenges facing our society. And so with that, we decided the only way to scale, if you think about the level of venture capital in the world last year was something like $370 billion. America was 200 billion of that. And this year it's forecast to be about 380 billion, notwithstanding some of the turmoil that we are going through at the moment. And so we said, for our little part of that, we can't scale alone. So for us, scale is amplified positive impacts, but it's joining forces with other investors and entrepreneurs who are interested in revolution and systemic change. And systemic change for us is the 2% that has been pretty rigid for 100 years of women getting any of the venture capital, the 380 billion of the venture capital. It's changing the size of the pie. The venture capital pie is women step into their financial power as the great wealth transfer occurs, and it's also growing the participation of women in that pie, both as investors and as entrepreneurs, and to work with other similar values organisations who are willing to grow that pie as well.
Thanks, Pamela. But, it's great to hear how you're thinking about the world and where you see the future. But, founders in particular, I think have a very different mindset in terms of what they need to scale. And it's the same for our venture capital firm. So maybe, Caroline, you can chime in what you see as scale.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Caroline Tran, co-founder and CEO of Hello Clover. So we are a global financial technology company based out of Sydney, Australia. So it's really great to see a fellow Australian here. So we provide and build payment infrastructure from scratch, but our key main product pillars include payment infrastructure, loyalty as a service, and intelligence data insights. So we started in Australia back in 2021, and now we have grown into markets such as Japan and Southeast Asia, soon to be Africa as well. So for me, from my perspective, scale is, consists of three really main things. The first one is having that vision as a global vision. So meaning you're going to think about, how we can build a business from scratch, but with a global opportunity. The second one is how you can then automate and make sure that everything, provide meaningful results and meaningful intelligence data for your business from day one. And the third one is to get into that talent market and having the right people on your team. So yeah, simple as that.
My name is Xander Brumbaugh. I'm the founder and CEO of GameBeast, and we do data analytics tools for game developers, and specifically game developers on high-growth gaming platforms. And so I'm sure if any of you have kids or know people with kids, you're probably very familiar with platforms like Roblox, Fortnite, Discord. These are all platforms where there is tremendous global scale and community. So what does scale mean in the context of what we do? So it's inherently global just by nature of these platforms. But community is a tremendous focus, and that can mean a lot of different things depending on, who is trying to access this space. So for example, Katie Penn earlier today, she gave a talk and she was talking about the power of user-generated content, UGC, and how critical that is for everyone from those that just want to create their own content to brands to IP holders, and how they connect with all of the idiosyncrasies of today's true gen and that feeling of authenticity. And so there's a lot of global scale and scale community by leveraging the nature of user-generated content on these platforms and what we do. And when you connect that more specifically with gaming, like another speaker here today, Jan Rusner, was talking about just the absolute scale of the gaming market. It far surpasses, any other thing like film, fashion by pure spend through the ecosystem and just sheer number of billions of hours of engagement overall. Kind of when you're at this very powerful intersection of both UGC and gaming, that's where you can bring tremendous power for anything that you're doing, from brands, IP, advertisers, to just original creative content creation. And so that's what scale means to us.
So all three very different perspectives of scale, and I'm going to throw another one into this mix, and it obviously comes from wearing a venture capital hat, which is how did we scale our firm? And, one of the things that we have done over the years is we introduced a layer of technology using AI, using some data science in order for us to source more deals, but also process more deals faster. So from the top of funnel in terms of how many companies we can actually review a year went from about 750 to 800 a year to over 1,000. The number of companies that we can dive deeper into and do a second, third level of diligence thanks to some automated tools also jumped about threefold. So the use of technology in venture is helping us scale as a firm. It also means that it frees up time for our analysts and our investment team to do more with our founders. And so helping our founder scale has also doubled. But real world practical sort of things for the other founders out in the audience, as you have tried to build your businesses, and I'll start with Caroline, give me something specific that you found was very helpful in terms of when you started and what you learned versus what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think, obviously starting from scratch, and when OMVC invested in us, we were a team of like 5 people, and now we're a team of 50 employees globally, right? Spread across Sydney, Singapore, Japan, Philippines, and Vietnam. So we've seen, I guess, from the start, we have to look into how we can then automate everything from, obviously, getting, a team of 5 to 50. So because building a payment infrastructure from scratch, and we have deep connection into the banking ecosystem in the markets that we work with. So for example, we work with like 10 banks in Australia. In Japan, we work with like 3 banks. And overall, we work with 30 banks. So how could then, automate the entire process because we're a payment company, right? So from, getting into the regulatory requirements, onboarding, streamline the entire I guess, know your business, know your customers process, and make sure that everything makes sense and make sure everything can be automated. So that was something that we had to start from the beginning. And because utilizing technologies from that perspective, it has been able to help us to reach to like millions of customers from day one, right? So I think it's really important to having, I guess, that vision from day one. And from that perspective, we have been heavily invested into our technologies, right? We've got a team of engineers that have been, working on it, from, AI perspective to even like data scientist perspective to make sure that has to be, one of the angles that we focus on. And then, one of the things that we think we have to be at the top line of everything we do is that we need to make sure that we stay competitive with all the technologies that we build and to make sure that create values for our customers.
I think you bring up something that's almost a bit of an ironic point in our own experience, in that when you have many hundreds of millions of monthly active users, say, that are engaging on these platforms with the games and content that our clients make, the reason we exist, data analytics as a tool and as a service, is to help them make sense of all that noise and derive insights that are actually actionable. And so I think for a long time, we were putting a lot of our own focus on, as we are helping our clients, reach tremendous scale, and we naturally are scaling with them. How do we preserve kind of our own sense of culture, keeping a sight on our own goals, and being able to scale with our clientele while we see such strong growth? And so that is somewhere where we put a lot of focus specifically, and I think we've learned a lot of strategies, even just over the last few months, specifically on everything from clear communication, how you work together, and kind of defining your values very explicitly, but also making sure that everyone within your company, regardless of position, let's say hierarchically, that they understand how they tie into the mission of your company, and also being able to explain that at sort of varying levels of detail as well, depending on the situation.
And Pamela, I've been dying to ask you this question since I first met you, but with Impact Imperative, one of the books you wrote, you interviewed 130 entrepreneurs and founders and investors, and if you think about scale in their mind, what was a few takeaways you could share with us around that?
Thank you. I did bring a copy. Where did I put it?
Well, we could do another book signing out there, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah, I have got several books if anyone would like one later. I think with Impact Imperative, so that was the work that was started with the Institute for the Future, and then we became so entrenched in what did 2030 look like that we kept going with the research and started consulting with people all around the world who are at the leading edge of the best ways to navigate the seismic jolts that were going to bombard us during this decade. And so the kinds of things that those people were doing in the 2010s were things like obviously focusing on teams, but their teams were very diverse. They did have quite a few women on the teams. Shanoa mentioned earlier today that Blue Startups says 5 key things that they look for in a startup, and teams are the first 3. And the teams for the 2020s, we know that we are in a period of unprecedented challenges facing humankind. We're also, as a psychologist, I've been watching, there's a whole bunch of research looking at the rise of global intelligence through the 20th century, and that has started to decline. And so we are at a point of declining global intelligence while we're facing some of the biggest challenges humanity has ever faced. And so the people who are working on that are people who are utilising diverse, inclusive teams where we know already through 20 years of research that when women are in any decision-making team, whether it's a startup, a Fortune 500, a venture capital firm, a medical team, a legal team, then women raise the group intelligence or the group IQ, collective intelligence of any team. So to not have women on your team is a massive risk as you face all these bombarding.
I really want to echo this because of female-led business. It's a female-led business as well, what Pamela said. So from the start of, creating our business, we have always put initiatives out for women, because that's how we think there's a gap in the market, right? There's only 2% of venture capital money went to, all female founded businesses. We need to improve that, Pamela. So I kind of wanted to think what's kind of initiative you've been looking at to kind of increase that number.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the other things that these people at the cutting edge of navigating the seismic jolts and doing things that were going to bring positive impacts and amplified positive impacts. One of the things I talk about in Impact Imperative, and the fellow Aussie on the panel will understand this, to be able to think simultaneously like a futurist and an ancient Aboriginal Australian. So ancient Aboriginal Australians, similar to Indigenous people in Hawaii, very connected to the land, very aware that what goes round comes round, that everything we do impacts somebody, somewhere, sometime. And for a futurist, futurists think 20, 30, 40 years into the future. So if you combine those two perspectives, then you're better able to say what I'm doing in the now will have consequences in the future, but it's also connected to the past. And so we find the last couple of years I've also extended the Impact Imperative research, and I've been talking with women investors, women entrepreneurs around the world, because most of the people who I interviewed for my venture capital research, the psychology of venture capital decision making 30 years ago, because I could only find one female venture capitalist then, were all men. So I'm sort of bookending that now. And so the other thing that these people do is collaborate. So they don't work alone. They collaborate with diverse groups who are known for diversity is getting added to creativity and innovation. So
I really like your sort of temporal tie-in at the end there, where things have effects both in the future, but they stem from things that have, of course, naturally have happened in the past. And even earlier in your point there, when you begin to scale, when you begin to reach tremendous scale, I think that a lot of people start to lose sight of the fact that there is still a lot of diversity, because just purely by the numbers, when you reach that scale, numbers begin to average out. There's not significant shifts, but I guess more qualitatively within your own company and also who you're working with, there's sort of a mirrored effect of the diversity of problems that people you're working with are facing, and that can only be met with diversity of thought, of lived experience, to be able to approach those problems. One of my team members, actually, she quite a bit of her family lives here in Hawaii, and just kind of her own lived experience, how kind of the culture she grew up with, living with, especially within a smaller community. Her family's from Molokai. How she kind of takes some of those perspectives uniquely and applies them to a lot of the problems we see within our own company has, been tremendously helpful, and we would not have had that sort of perspective and help in solving problems otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's incredible, and I'm kind of curious, as we've looked at some success stories and scale and how you guys sort of look at it and tackle it and define it. It's what also has gone wrong that you've seen, like when you've tried to scale and it didn't work out. And I want to start, frankly, with you, Xander, because you're fascinating. You wear so many hats: author, game developer, like running a company. You must have encountered some problems along the ways, and I'm trying to think of like what are the ones that have really you've struggled with the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel very fortunate in that I've been able to do all those things rather effectively. I don't feel worn at the end of the day. I can say that confidently I still live for this. But to your point, I think that...
That is my point, personally, right?
Yes.
Because a founder goes through so much. And personally, how have you scaled yourself?
Yeah, I think that touching back to what I was talking about in the sense of a company, but I'll personalize that in a second. Everyone, regardless of what position they fulfill, should have a pretty strong understanding of how what they're doing ties into some larger goal. I think that we work with a lot of partners in Japan, and I think that's even just a more societal value where you see people take a lot of pride in whatever role they do in whichever position or sector that they work in. And so in anything that I choose to pursue, I think about how it ties into how it fulfills my personal goals, but also what is actually driving me to pursue something. So usually those personal goals aren't just to, put it on a resume per se, but, it's ultimately to serve something that I'm passionate about. So, I wrote a best-selling book that teaches people how to make games on the platform, on Roblox specifically, where, I got my start many years ago, taught myself how to program, and ultimately that led me to found a company and do everything that I do today. And I want to kind of eliminate those roadblocks on Roblox, if you will, in my own experience, and extend that opportunity to learn and potentially, become an entrepreneur based off that. And so just kind of continuing that, passing it on, giving back to community is something that's immensely important to me.
Fantastic.
I feel like I have the same thing with you as well, building a business because you just being passionate, super passionate about something you wanted to solve. So when we started our business as well, Gavin and I, we're both high school friends, and we started the business. And this is something I was, talking to one of the press in Australia. We had no idea what we were doing. Like literally, we had no payment backgrounds. I was an accountant. He was a software engineer at Microsoft. During the pandemic in 2021, we kind of like, all right, let's just sit down and kind of like try to build something together because we've got nothing to lose, right, in our 20s. And that's where we started to kind of like map out the ideas of Hello Clever and where it is today. But obviously, when it comes to challenges, I guess more specifically in our industry, as a payment business or a license regulated business, it comes with a lot of obligations and requirements from the government to run, I guess, a couple of issues around how you can facilitate money movement. When we started in Australia, we were fortunate enough to be one of the, only fintechs to really deep dive into building, the first real-time payment infrastructure for that market. And then now scaling into, let's say, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, and other markets like Philippines. Then we need to navigate that localization and navigate, the local framework, legal framework, how we can fit in and how we can then, as well as, get into that markets with, one of the best, products to compete with the local companies out there, right? So I think it's so important for businesses like ourselves or like for founders to really find that market research and find out, I guess, top priorities for you and the opportunities for you to, every single time you go to find, and scale into, new horizon.
Yeah. And Pamela, for you as well, right? You're the tri-country citizen in some ways, How is it in your travel schedule and just the day-to-day life that you can manage all the things that you need to get done, and particularly from investing to writing to what you do?
It's one of the reasons I want to be in Hawaii. We invest across Africa, Asia, Australia, and the US. And time zones, I realise one of the negatives of me being here in Hawaii trying to manage that is that I'm doing a time zone that is starting at 5 a.m. in Texas and then goes till late in the evening for Australia. So I'm spanning multiple time zones, but discipline for oneself, take time out to make sure that you're doing the wonderful things that give you joy, to quote Brent, to surround yourself with really good team members who can delegate things, and especially when crises happen in the time zone that you happen to be asleep. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I went around this afternoon and I was talking to a number of founders and other investors, and I was asking them the same question. What does scale mean to you? How do you scale your personal time? How have you scaled your businesses? And whether that scale went from, hey, I have an idea on paper, to now I've got a prototype. That's scale. And now I've got a prototype and I've got my first client. That's scale. And the question was thrown back to me, and for the similar, it's like, how do we think about it? And oftentimes we think about it in financial terms. We're looking at the speed of revenue. How fast can a company acquire new customers and grow the top line, or have higher contribution to their margins, and all of these mechanical financial side of things. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is right here for what you guys have talked about. It's the team, it's the people, it's what you can do personally, it's how you impact those individuals around you that help not just you scale, but has the business scales and help their team members scale. It has a really incredible domino effect. But the best answer I heard today was talking to somebody who's got a very good job, actually, and I was saying, well, how do you scale at your job, particularly if you're in a corporate and these things? He's like, well, I don't need more work. I just need more money. So I always think that was a good way to go. Listen, we've had a great conversation. We have a few minutes left. Is there anything you guys would like to add or share about scale in your world and what you have coming next?
I think for me, with the definition of scale, or the objective of scale being to unite with other revolutionary systems changing investors who are looking for positive amplified impacts for the big challenges we're facing, along with financial returns on investment, that we can't do that as individuals alone. We can't change the 2% venture capital only going to women entrepreneurs, which just blows my mind every time I hear it. We can only do that if we band together and collaborate. And we also see that we have complementary strengths. So women bring things to the team that complement what is already in a male team. So we can grow that venture capital pie, especially as the great wealth transfer happens, as women step into their financial power. So we can scale all our power. As Sally Krawcheck of Ellevest said, nothing bad happens when women have access to capital.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening. Great panel. Appreciate the time. And please, anybody out there, you want to talk about scale, learn more about what they're doing, read Pamela's book, please see them directly. Thank you.
Thank you.